Hello and welcome to Art Your Truth. Today we're doing video 2 in our Christmas in July series. I'm gonna show you how I've created this cute little Christmas penguin hanging from a string of Christmas lights. So as usual, I start out with a recycled Diet Coke box. It's already been gessoed. And what I just showed you was a jelly print that I created. And what was interesting about that jelly print is I used embossing folder as texture. I think it was my second or third ghost that I did. I added a little bit of light blue. So anyhow, I wanted to give this card a little bit more texture. So instead of just using a single piece of this jelly print, I'm tearing it up and just adhering it with the gel matte medium from Liquitex. I figured it's a penguin, they live in the cold, a blue background would probably make sense, so that's where I went with it. All right, drying this and then I'll be trimming the edges. Okay, now we're going to get to the painting. So I'm going to grab my Dina Wakley Elephant Gray and my favorite brush, which is round brush size 0 from Princeton. And we're going to draw the wire to the string of lights. And just going to basically start near the top. And I'm going to droop it down in the middle because that's where the penguin's going to be hanging. And most of this video is real time, but when I'm going over something over and over again because I have OCD, I'll speed it up. And forgive me for the lights. I think I've identified the problem and I've relocated some lights in my office. So hopefully this will be the last video that has light like this. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to create the hands of the penguin. So I'm grabbing the black marble from Dylusions and I'm creating the hands. So at the end of their arms, assuming the anatomy of a penguin is that they're like a rounded fin, like a rounded triangle. So that's what I'm drawing here. And I'm bringing that hand up above the wire because that gives the illusion that the hand is coming up from the other side of the wire and then going over it. So hence he's hanging on to the wire. And since penguins have, at least my penguin does, I'm not a penguin expert, probably short arms, his head isn't going to be too far down. So for interest, I'm going to put the head in front of the wire. So we have the wire, we've got a hand, we've got a head, and then another hand. It kind of creates that three-dimensional interest there. So with the head, I'm going to shape it like a Mickey Mouse head, basically. Round on the top, and then I'm going to flare out the edges a little bit to create chubby cheeks. And yeah, so it's kind of like a Mickey Mouse head. Giving it the little widow's peak to accentuate where the eyes are. And fill that in. Now I'm going to draw the body. So the body, I'm going to make him a chubby penguin. So I'm going to flare out his body. So I'm going to make it wider at the bottom. We all have, well, at least I do. I have a wide bottom. So yeah, flaring it out to make it wider at the bottom, and then I'll bring it back in again, and that's basically where his legs and butt are going to be. Just fill that in as much as you want. I want him to have a bigger belly, so the thinner you make these sides, the indication, which means he's going to have more belly, right? So yeah, if you want him to have a big fat belly, then make those sides a little bit thinner. That's fine. So straight up, these are his arms or his fins. We're going to go straight up from the body, and then we're going to attach them to the hand. And on the inside, you're going to attach it to the wire, but you're not going to go over the wire. And that's going to give you the impression that his hand is, or his arm is coming from behind the wire. So on the outside of the arm, you're going to attach it to the hand, but on the inside near his head, you're going to attach it to the wire. And drawing his butt. And a little tail. I'm not sure if penguins have tails, but in the inspiration photo that I found on Pinterest, he had a tail. So I'm adding a tail because I think it's cute. So grabbing the cut grass, the green, I'm going to draw in or paint in some rather large lights, Christmas lights. And all I'm doing here is I'm doing a square or a rectangle, and then adding a bulb shape to the end of it. And if you look there, you'll see that I'm not starting it at the edge of the wire. I'm starting it from within the middle of the wire, and I'm angling them at different angles. And this is going to give you the illusion that these are three-dimensional. They're facing different ways. They're not just hanging, they're actually protruding from the wire. And now I'm going to do the same with Postbox red. Excuse me. So the first one that's going to be coming up in the middle, so the wire is behind his head, so you're not going to see that square. You're not going to see it coming out of the wire, so I'm just drawing a bulb coming out of his head. And again, doing different angles. I'm drawing a second and then a third on the other side. So even without shading or highlighting, etc., you already get the impression that this wire is kind of twisted, right? And that these bulbs are going in all different directions. And that's how you do that, with angles and how you position them on the string. Grabbing a bigger brush so I can cover more area, and my Dina Wakley white, which is a heavy acrylic paint. And now I'm painting in the body. If I wasn't using the Dina Wakley and I was using a thinner paint, I probably would have gessoed this first, but Dina's paints are rather thick. That works for and against you, and depending on what you're doing. But in this case, I just have to put, basically one coat. You'll also see that I'm going over the black and reshaping his belly and reshaping his face. Again, it's a perk of having a thicker, heavy, acrylic. You can go over darker colors, and it's got really good coverage. And if you don't, then you're just going to have to, the way to get around that is doing multiple layers. So you want to put a layer on, you have to let it dry, and then put another layer on, and eventually you'll get that darker color underneath to disappear. So down below here, I'm going to create his legs. All I'm doing is just putting a circle. I don't know what his legs really look like, but I'm putting a circle right there of the white. And you're not going to be able to really see this in the end results, but I like to put in layers like this because it helps me keep the right perspective, the right dimensions. By having those legs there, now I know where his feet need to go, right? Versus if I didn't have those legs, I'd be guessing where his feet would be, and I might be high, might be low. Yeah. So yeah, I like to paint in layers like this. So coming in with the Tangerine Dream, and just below the foot, or sorry, below the leg that I drew the circle, I'm going to create a thumbnail shape. And that's going to be, the base of this little guy's feet. And I'm using the darker orange, so the Tangerine Dream, to do this, and I'll highlight it in a little bit. So drawing a little toe, drawing a bigger toe, and drawing the biggest toe. And penguin's feet, again, I'm not an anatomy expert, but I'm thinking that penguins' feet are webbed, so you're not going to draw individual toes like humans have. You're going to kind of join them into like a webbing. And just did the reverse on the other side, the big toe, littler toe. And now I'm going to go up and do the beak. So a lot of folks will be inclined to just draw a straight line across and do a triangle. It's not necessarily the right way to do that, right? You can, if that's what you want your penguin to, have a beak like that, but he's got a round face, and the beak is probably rounded, not straight across, and probably not like a duck. So it's probably rounded. So I do a rounded top, and then I bring it down straight towards me, because he's a forward-facing penguin, straight towards me. And now I'm, adding a little bit around the base of that beak, because I think penguins have mouths. They have a bottom beak, I think. So I'm making it a little bit thicker on the top than I normally would if it was a bird. So now I'm coming in with the highlights, and you'll see that the light source is up here. So I am basically highlighting his toes on the top and to the right, and on his feet, because his toes are probably bent over, I'm only doing the bottom right of the left foot. And for the right foot, I'm just doing the very bottom of his heel, because the way the light source is coming in, I think that his toes are going to be blocking the sun for a lot of that. So fast forwarding, because I'm just going over, fussing. And then on the beak, it's the right hand side and the top that I'm highlighting. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the lights. So when you're dealing with acrylics, because it takes a little time to dry, moving from piece to piece and letting the other one dry helps you be a little bit more efficient in completing your painting. So in order to show that a given object is lit, you have to have a dark and a light. So I've mixed the white and the red that I used to paint the original light bulb, and I am going in there with that lighter color around the middle. I'm leaving the tips of the light bulbs dark. The mixture wasn't light enough for me, so I'm just going straight in with the white, versus getting this never-ending battle that I seem to always do, where you add white and then you add red. Oh, too much red, you need more white. Oh, too much white, more red, etc. So when you're doing small objects like this, you can just add the color to the object and then just blend it in a little bit. So again, we want this to look lit, so we've got to have the light and dark contrast. So I'm making sure that the edges are darker and the tips are darker, and now you get a lit light bulb. And then another thing with the adding white, yes, I have lighter greens and lighter reds or pinks, I would say. But adding white to a color that you already use, especially if you're layering over, is actually a really smart thing to do, because now you've got the same tone, same warmth, same same color, just lighter. So that's just a little tip. You don't have to worry about color theory, that you've got, too warm or too dark or too cool of a color. It's going to match. So light sources there. For the highlights on the skin, I'm going with the elephant gray. And if this was not I'm assuming, shiny object, let me stop right there for a second. Right now, what I'm doing is I am highlighting that this little guy has a cheek. So you see that line that I drew up there? He has a cheek, so I'm not just doing the back of the cheek, I'm doing the top of the cheek as well. And then on the right side, and on the right side, I just highlighted the right side towards the back, not the whole side. And the reason for that is because he's got a round belly, so I'm assuming that only the back side of him is getting the light and the front side is away from the light. And then on the left side of his side, I only did some highlights on his leg, because again, he's got a round body, his head's there. I'm assuming that that's blocking the sun. Now I'm going around and I'm using the same color to shade on the white. And underneath his head, I shaded the left side underneath his head a little bit more than the right side, and that's because the light source is coming from the right. And now I'm just doing a very thin shading around his face, and I do that around his body as well. So when you have a round object, you have a point where the object is going away from you, it's receding away from you. The view eventually, you don't see the other side of it. And by using a darker color, not too dark, you're pushing that back. So it's automatically giving you that perception that it is actually receding. So it gives you that rounded effect, three-dimensional. All right, now this, I'm shading on the beak now, sorry. So I'm shading to the left of the beak and a little bit underneath. I am not shading the entire beak, because my assumption is that it's protruding outside the face, and that's not going to cast a shadow on his face the way that it's protruding. And with that pink that I used on the lights, I'm going to give him some rosy cheeks. So the more times that you can use the same color to do different things in a painting, the more congruent, the more, there's a word for it, and I'll come up with it eventually. But it's just gonna flow a lot better. It's gonna, your eye's gonna bounce, especially with reds. It loves red. Your eyes love red. It's gonna bounce, between where you have these different colors. So deciding that I'm going to do the floating technique around the lights. And then I said, oh, you know what, I should do the wire. So I grabbed the black to do the wire, which was a great idea. I wish I would have stuck with it, because doing the lights first made it a little difficult and it didn't get the exact look that I wanted. So if you're watching this video, please do the floating technique on the string first before you do this on the lights. So with the floating technique, and I'll give you a link to Karen Burchill's video on how she does this, but the basic is you take an angle brush, you dip that angle brush in water, you take a little bit of that water off so you don't want it to be dripping, and then you tip the very tip of the angle brush in the paint. Then you take the angle brush and you line it up with the edge of whatever you're highlighting or low lighting, and the paint will be more concentrated at the tip because that's where the paint is. But with the water in the brush, it's similar to watercolors. It's going to flow. That paint is going to thin out and flow out with the water, so you're not getting a real harsh line. So you get it's a double whammy. You get a nice defined line where you want it, which is against the object, and then it diffuses out. So it gives you, you know, not a blurry edge, but, you know, a diffused aura, however you want to call it. You think with as many times as I've done this and described it that I would come up with good words, but I still haven't. Okay, going to do the same thing with the red. I'm going in with a darker red. And I think you can see it a little bit better here with the red than you could with the green because, again, my lighting, which is fixed now. So right there, you can definitely see where that paint diffuses out. So it's not such a harsh edge. It's not like you're taking a detail brush and painting a line around it. You don't get that line. You get a nice soft, maybe that's the word, soft edge. And again, I'm not perfect at this. Right here, you'll see I put on way too much paint. And you know what? That's not terrible. You just dip your brush in the water, squeegee off some of the water, and then you water that paint down because it isn't dry yet. So now you've got, these lights that are looking, in my opinion, they're looking pretty cool, pretty dimensional. They look lit. They look like they're going in all different directions. So grabbing the black, and now I'm going to do the floating acrylic technique around the wire. And the reason why I should have done this first is, so now I'm coming up on the green light and I have the green soft edge there. I'm going to overwrite it. I'm going to, it's basically, I'm coming up to it and then it's going to go over that edge. Well, that's not the look I wanted. I wanted the light to come out from the wire. Do you know what I mean? It's a very minute detail, but I'm my own worst critic, and it doesn't support the story that I'm trying to tell here, that these lights are coming out from this wire. Well, then why isn't my shading and that soft edge over the black? Anyhow, just saying, it would be easier if you just did it first. Okay, so continuing to do this on the other side. And another thing I wanted to make sure you don't forget to get those edges in between where the head is and the hand is as well, because that's part of your story. That's part of your dimension, your 3D that you're trying to portray. That's a big part of it, actually, is making sure that they can see that wire on either side of his hand and going behind his head, because that's giving you, it adds to the three-dimensional effect that you want to have. All right, I am fast forwarding because I can't leave well enough alone, and I've got to go over this a million times. But hopefully you got the basics of that. So wow, that was a lot of paint that I accidentally put out, and that was the Dina Wakley night. So the penguin's black. I didn't think that it would be a good idea to use black to do the floating technique around the penguin. I thought that it might confuse the eye a little bit. It might muddy up the edge, I guess you would say. Um, and you wouldn't get the same effects. So I decided to go with the dark blue. It's a blue background, and I thought it might be appropriate. So going in with the night and doing the same technique, dipping my brush in the water, putting the tip in the paint, and then running that tip against the edge of wherever I'm trying to low light in order to make that specific object pop. And then I dip it in water again and, go over where I think it's too thick or spread it out a little bit. I'm going to fast forward because this video is going to be longer than I usually like. And you've seen me do this floating technique on a couple times now. So just basically going around the rest of his body with that night and reinforcing or spreading out that soft edge. I don't know if you can see it, but I think he's popping out pretty good there. Don't forget to do the top of his hands and his head. So I thought, oh, maybe, sorry, here, I wouldn't do this. So if you're doing this along with me, I wouldn't bother. I thought, oh, I'll add the blue, and maybe that'll give a shadow effect to the hands, right? Because of the light source, it would be shadowed underneath there. It didn't work, so it was kind of wasted time. I don't know what I was thinking. You've got a watered down acrylic over black. It's not going to make a difference. So I like the blue so much, I decided I'm going to go over the black with the blue. I'm keeping this fast forwarded because, once again, the perfectionist in me. And it's up to you if you want to keep it black, or if you don't want to do the floating technique and you just want to use a black pen or marker to outline it. That's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. It's all, I think the floating technique is definitely a preference, whether you like it or not. It's entirely up to you if you want to go through that extra effort. So here I'm taking a Uni-Ball pen, which is not my favorite pen, but it was the only one I had at the moment. What I do absolutely love, if you want a recommendation, and I'll link this as well, is it's a Fude Ball pen. Absolutely love this pen. But on this, I am coloring in the eyes with the black pen, and I'm also drawing a line underneath his eyes that's connecting to the cheek. I end up removing this with the white. I didn't like it, and then I end up using that night color and paint over the eyes. So skip the black lines unless you like it. If you like it, that's fine. But I ended up, painting over it with the white. Here I'm adding little, indicators where his belly's rolling up and his chin's folding up, etc., and where his legs are. You can see them a little bit. Another thing that I wouldn't do again is separating the toes with ink. I didn't like that either in the end result. And here I just accidentally put my card into the paint. Okay, so if I were to do this again, I would skip the pen at this stage. So shading in the belly. So if you've watched my videos before, you know where skin meets skin or an object meets an object. I like to put some shading there. And it might not be shaded like that, but it gives you the illusion that there's a line there. Same with where his feet are. And I'm going to start shading around the belly again. I do this several times. I think I'm gonna hopefully fast forward or speed this up. I fidget with a lot of stuff, a lot of the time. So going in here, reshaping his eyes. Figured they got lost a little bit. I did a little bit too much shading, so I'm bringing that white back. Making his cheeks a little whiter. And then I'm also, reducing that line a little bit of where I drew the pen with the pen and making his belly whiter. When you have something that's darker on the edges and it's whiter in the middle or lighter in the middle, it gives you definitely that rounded effect. Another thing that makes a huge difference is on this wire, in my opinion, is adding that highlight back in on that wire. Gives it another three-dimensional effect. Again, going in with a pen, don't like it, it's not working, so now I'm going to bring in the black, and all I'm going to do here is color in that triangle with the black, because Christmas lights usually have a green or a green or a white or a black part that screws into the wire. I'm keeping it black because I don't want to introduce another color. I'm going to use the same color that I've got already in the paint in the painting. So just going over that color with the black, and now you've got light bulbs. So highlighting, bringing back the light source, taking the white. I'm assuming the plastic is a little shiny, so I'm using a lighter color, and I'm highlighting, I'm looking at how that particular light is protruding. So if you just looked, I highlighted only at the top because I think it's facing to the right. So the sun wouldn't be on the bottom right? So you just got to think about, with your light source, how you want that bulb to be facing and where you will put that highlight, because it will add to the story that you're telling. Again, going back in with the white. I think I do this at least one more time after this, but I'm fast forwarding, fidgeting. And now I'm going to add lights on or highlights on the bulbs, because it's glass, right? So it's going to be catching the light a little bit. Again, if you look at the placement, it's not the same on every single one. It all depends. You've got to really think about, which direction is your bulb facing, and look at the light source. And if you want to mark your page up with a little mark or have a little arrow outside of your, ATC that has a pointing that shows you that and you can analyze it, that's fine. And again, this does not have to be exact. This is not a real life painting. I don't think you'll ever see a penguin in real life hanging from a string of lights. So it doesn't have to be real. So it's just a matter of, how technically correct you want it to be. If you don't care, and that's fine. I'm just OCD. Add in a little banner down at the bottom. And that's where I'm going to put my sentiment of happy holidays. I'm going to use the Night from Dina Wakley, that dark blue, and I'm going to do the floating technique around it. So instead of having just a white banner with a black line around it, I'm going to make it, a little bit more, maybe that's another description, a little bit more interesting and making it pop. Whenever I think I've said this before, and sorry if I'm repeating myself, and it's getting old, but whenever you put something dark next to something light, your eye automatically sees that that's background. just the way your eyes work when you're looking at a painting. It automatically says, oh, that's, you know, that's in the background. That light thing is closer to me, right? It's popping out at me. That's basically what I'm doing there. Okay, grabbing the Tangerine Dream, the darker red, and I'm reinforcing the low lights and highlights on the feet and the beak. I apparently wasn't satisfied with it, so your light source is back, so the lower left, the left side of the beak is the darker side. And then down at the bottom, and I'm also kind of going over that black that I didn't, the black pen that I didn't like, just reinforcing, you know, the left bottom side of each of these objects is going to be darker because of shadows. And then coming in with the Pure Sunshine, the lighter, and, you know, reinforcing the highlights. OCD again with that Pure Sunshine. And the light source is back up again so you can see where I'm putting this. All right, grabbing the night, and this is where I'm going to go over the eyes. That black pen just didn't do it for me, so I would just go ahead and go in with paint without doing the black pen if I were to do this again. And then I thought that the wire behind its head, remember how I was saying how important it is to show that, to tell your story, that he's hanging from a wire. I thought that that back wire was a little lost, so I'm adding some more highlight with the elephant gray so that, you know, so that pops back there a little bit. My dog is snoring. Sorry, can't control when that happens. Okay. Grab my white, and to me, a live object in their eyes, adding that little white, you know, it's not a dot. It's either a diagonal line or maybe a series of 2 dots. It depends on what eye it is and how big it is. But to me, by adding that to the eyes, you're giving that little penguin some life. Using that pen that I don't like and writing in Happy Holidays, adding dashes to the tops and bottoms of letters makes them look a lot fancier. Now I'm going to go in with that pen, and I'm having to overwrite it, you know, so I'm having to, you know, constantly go back and forth. I'm going to make sure to draw the line behind the banner and any object that it comes up to, and that again adds to your story, that adds to, you know, the dimensionality that you're trying to portray. So if you have lines going behind these things, that automatically tells your viewer, that other thing must be in the front, right? So it adds to your 3D effect. It emphasizes that. Again, doing the floating technique with the night and the angle brush. I found that a 1/4 inch angle brush works the best, for me at least. I have the better control, but I think Karen Burchill uses the 1/2 inch in her technique. I think it's just a matter of, again, preference. Either like the technique or you don't, and how it looks, and then, you know, what you use, how much water you use, how much paint you use, etc. It's all a learning curve and a matter of preference. When she does it, I think she does her lines a lot thinner than my lines. And A, I can't get it that thin. I'm not that good yet. And B, I think I like it a little thicker. And I thought I was done, but like an infomercial. But wait, there's more. I forgot to do the edges. So using the knife and a sponge and doing the edges, and now my little penguin guy is done. I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.